Everybody, welcome to another episode of Campus2Canton here on the Better Sports Network. Got Chris Moxley, Matt Bruening here with you. We're going to be talking all kinds of college football. We'll talk a little bit of NFL as well. We had not a great national championship game here almost a week ago now at this point, Moxley. Georgia kind of crushes TCU. Not necessarily a great representation of the college football season or college football, but that is the game that we got. Georgia beats TCU 65-7. What's your thoughts on the game? Was that a true representation of college football in the 2022 season?
We had two really great semifinal games, and Georgia got taken down to the wire with Ohio State, and I felt that they could have won that game or should have won the game, depending on how you feel about Ryan Day's play calling. So, was it a representation of the season? No, but it was probably a representation of who TCU was all year. I mean, how many times do we call them the Horned Frogs, right? Week after week, just saying how they didn't deserve to be there. That result does not surprise me. But I'm not going to complain about two great semifinal games. I just take the positive. Now that college football is over, I got to find a little bit of light.
Yeah, it is a little bit sad to think here we are already. I feel like the season just started and we're already talking about the end of the college season. I mean, we're almost wrapping up the NFL season. We got great playoff games coming up this weekend. So it's insane that we're already, it feels like it goes by so quick. Maybe it's because of, we're working constantly, right? Never stops during the football season. You don't really get a chance to appreciate it as much as you think you do. And the next thing you know, it is done. Now, I'm with you on the game, though. I mean, We've talked a lot about it, behind the scenes and in our group chats about how I don't know that Georgia really beats them 65-7 if they were to play 100 times. The game really kind of worked perfectly for Georgia. Like they came out on fire. Everything was clicking. It's just one of those games where you see it in every sport. We're both big baseball fans as well. Sometimes the pitcher just doesn't have it that night. And just because you lose 25-2 doesn't mean you're that bad of a team. I saw the Dodgers lose by 16, 17 plus runs earlier this year. Now they didn't end up winning the World Series, but we've seen them win the World Series in the past couple of years. Your Braves have lost bad games. They've won the World Series of late as well. Sometimes game just doesn't go your way. It's unfortunate that had to be the national championship game because we did see a lot of people on Twitter and all the social media spaces saying, "No, why do I want to watch college football if this is what the games are going to be?" That's an unfair representation of the game, and it does kind of suck because that is the one that they really highlight. Obviously, it being a Monday night game, no NFL game to focus on. I really wish they would do a better job of putting the semifinal games not on New Year's Eve when most people. I was not out celebrating. I was watching the games and then getting very upset, but most people are out celebrating, right? It's a new year. The younger generation is probably out at bars. Maybe they're glancing up at TVs at the bars. They're not really paying attention. So I wish they would do a better job of representing that, but we might get that with this 12-team playoff that's coming down the pipes. And we've seen a lot of people talking about how that game on Monday when TCU got destroyed by Georgia, that this shows this is validating. We should not expand the playoffs. Do you agree with that argument?
No, it's just a stupid argument. I find it hard to believe that TCU would make the championship game in a 12-team playoff. That is my argument. They would get weeded out before then. They would lose. And they did beat Michigan, so I don't want to act like that TCU is just some scrub team because they're not. They obviously beat the winner of the Big Ten. But I don't think that they would be able to keep the run that they had. I think they would have lost earlier. So I think you're going to get a more homogenous final result out of the 12 team than you are of the 14, mostly because you can get like a one-off in TCU, Cincinnati, back-to-back years. I don't think you're going to get TCU and Cincinnati in the 14 playoff. I think you're going to get like Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and Michigan, USC, whoever you want that 14 to be. I don't think you're getting a TCU again.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Now, I'll be 100% honest with the audience here. I've been pro playoff expansion since it was first talked about. One of the other co-founders of our website, love the man, Austin, is very much a get off my lawn type of guy. He is not he is not pro playoff expansion. But I actually do think it does fix, let's be honest, it fixes the problem that they created. They kind of created this problem in going to the 14 playoff. But I do think the 12-team one fixes it. Is that, as you mentioned, TCU likely, if you put up like a 10, 12, 15-year run, obviously, 15, 20 years down the road, TCU is likely not going to be in many national championships. It's going to be the high-end teams, the best teams, because there is less parity in college football than there is, say, on the NFL side of things. The example I've used a lot when talking about the playoffs is the Giants making that run from the wild card and winning the Super Bowl. But the Giants in those instances weren't that big of a step down from the teams they were playing. TCU is a bigger step down than some of the teams that they played, including Michigan. I still think they were a decent little step down from Michigan. And I do think, as you mentioned, the 12-team playoff kind of eliminates that because TCU then has to get through multiple games. Now, it would only had to have been 2 because they probably would have still stayed as the 4th seed. Or actually, they wouldn't. See, they wouldn't even have been the 4th seed because they didn't win the Big 12. So they would have had to play 3 straight games, and I'd imagine they get knocked out at least in one of those, and they don't make it all the way. So I'm excited for it. I'm all here for it. It's going to be very interesting to see how that works out, and I think it's going to be great for college football. I mean, we did see that, for me at least, Georgia was the best team. You've talked about it. They were number 1 from start to finish. Never wavered. They didn't really. I mean, they struggled in a couple games, but it was never at a point where like, yeah, they're not the number 1 team in the nation. So congratulations to them for what they were able to do. But I do think that there's more parity coming in college football. We've kind of seen this talent spreading out a little bit. Now, Alabama, we say that, just went out and landed almost the most historically best recruiting class in all of football. So maybe Alabama's on their way back. But there's a lot of questions coming into this college football season. I'll be very intrigued to see what happens going into 2023. We're talking a lot about the college football playoffs, but I do want to mention really quick, we here at BSN have a NFL playoff challenge for you guys. For the fantasy football to continue in the NFL postseason, join our free NFL playoff challenge sponsored by Lucra. You can compete against the Better Sports Network host and community. You can click the link in our app right now or go to bettersports.com to register for free and set your lineup. The top score wins $500 cash plus an autographed full-size NFL helmet of the winner's choice and a free entry into the 2023 Real-Time Sports Fantasy Championship for a chance to win $500,000 grand prize. Compete in the NFL Playoff Challenge sponsored by Lucra. I'm in it. I know Moxley's going to get in it. Come challenge all of us. I finished second in the bowl game pick'em. I heard a lot of talk. I should have won it, in my opinion. I didn't. I finished second, so come see if you can beat me now in the NFL Playoff Challenge. Prove to me that you know more about the NFL than I do, and I'm excited to see how that goes again with all the NFL playoff games kicking off this weekend. We got to talk a bit about Stetson Bennett. Last year, he was, as ESPN liked to say it, and I know it's because they're in, not cahoot's not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? In a partnership.
Cahoots works for what you're
Disney.
trying to describe.
Okay, yeah.
Disney owns ESPN, so yes.
Disney owns ESPN. So when they were talking about Stetson Bennett a lot, it was always he's the Disney story, right? And he did have a great story. Walk on, shows up, like, let's just be honest, myself included, I can't put you in this category. You defended Stetson Bennett for 2 years. So I will not put you in this category. You have been on the Stetson Bennett train. You've been leading the conduct, and I've been, if you go to like those old Western movies, I'm the guy laying dynamite on the tracks, just trying to blow it up, trying to get the train to derail, because I did not think Stetson Bennett was it. But he's gone out there and done it. I mean, last year, we were like, nah, JT Daniels need to start. Even this year, coming off winning a national championship, it was like, nah, he's going, right? Like, we're going to see Brock Vandagriff, one of these guys. He's one of a handful of quarterbacks to win 2 national championships and back-to-back. There's really only been 3 quarterbacks. Technically, there's 4, but Matt Leinert's was an AP national championship. I don't think actually qualified as a legitimate national championship. And then they technically revoked his other one, which I still don't think is true. So technically, there's only been 3 other quarterbacks besides him who've won it. Where does this put him in the pantheon of college football players, like, because I'm going to ask you, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Chris K works with us over at Campus2Canton, brought up today that I had no idea. Like, he can't even get into the College Football Hall of Fame, which I find interesting.
He plays the most important position on the field in a vacuum. And he's probably not a top 12 player in terms of importance when it comes to the Georgia Bulldogs winning back-to-back national champions. He's fine. He can game manage his way through the season. I mean, they do not play a tough schedule, all things considered. Like, yes, they play the SEC. They play Auburn each year, obviously. They play LSU, like, in the SEC championship. But this is not a tremendously challenging schedule, considering the SEC East is generally a down division compared to the West. He could game manage his way through that. Do I think Stetson Bennett deserves to be in the College Football Hall of Fame? No. I find it hard to make that argument, considering he wasn't really the man leading the charge, except for maybe one quarter of this entire run that he's had. And I felt that was the fourth quarter versus Ohio State, and they almost still lost that game. I don't know. This feels like such a weak argument perpetuated by Bulldogs fans that, like, he's not even close to your most important player. Like, you're gonna have probably 10 players drafted between round 1 and round 3. Stetson Bennett is not going to be one of those guys. Just throwing that out there.
Where do you think he goes? He's going to get drafted, right? He's not going.
Oh, absolutely.
So where do you think he goes? I've said 5th round.
I think he's going to go round 4.
You think so? Okay, so it's still not that.
I've seen round 4, round 5.
That's bad. He's not going day 2. He is a gamer.
No, like, he's not going day 2.
Because I agree with you, and I know, like, I've not posted this on social media, but I feel like this is a safe space. So I'll say it here. I think Ohio State was by far the better team in that game. And
I thought so.
Okay, well, I can't post that on Twitter because I'm a homer, so I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to cause any discourse. I'm all about harmony and love, right? That's me. I don't, I love everybody. So I didn't want to post anything on Twitter and cause any issues, but I do believe Ohio State was the best team in that game. But Bennett did have an incredible final drive, and that is what he does. You mentioned he's a gamer. He finds ways to win these games. But I'm with you. I don't think that he deserves to go into the Hall of Fame. It's not a shot at him either. Like, sometimes good players make great plays and have great defining moments, but that doesn't mean they need to go into the Hall of Fame or have to be talked about as this elite NFL prospect or anything like that. Because you know what? It's great because he's going to live in infamy for Georgia fans forever, and he deserves to. Like, Georgia was not much before this when they had, and I forget, Rick, when they had Mark, they weren't winning national championships. Like, there were times they were good. They struggled. Kirby Smart comes in here, brings in the, if you want, like, the Nick Saban kind of mythology and the Alabama type ways here to Georgia's kind of turn them into an Alabama-esque type dynasty, it looks like, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. And Bennett's the one who helped get them there, but he wasn't the sole reason. So I'm with you on that. But I get Georgia Bulldog fans defending him and trying to prop him up, because I do think he gets a little bit more shade thrown at him than he probably deserves. And I think some of that comes from, and I'll be honest, it gets to me a little bit too with he was the underdog, and we were all rooting for him last year. I was rooting for him last year. I wanted to see Georgia win the national championship. I didn't want to see Big Bad Bama win another one. I was like, let's go. Let the walk-on do it, cement his legacy. Then he comes out here this year with the shaved head. He's got the stuff shaved into his hair. He's dropping bombs and all that stuff. It got to me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It's a really quick turn to go from, as is it Harvey Dent who says it, or is it Batman in The Dark Knight? I don't know if you've seen the movie. You either die the hero or you live long enough to see yourself.
It's Harvey when they're at dinner.
It is Harvey. That's right. You are right. Good job. Thank you. Felix wouldn't have gotten it.
I haven't seen Christopher Nolan's Batman movies. Come on.
Austin probably hasn't. So I know Felix would have. Felix listens to that soundtrack while he's working out. So Felix would have known that too.
It's a good soundtrack.
It is a good soundtrack. I'll just double check. Yeah. So that's what happened to Bennett this year. I think a lot of people, that's just the way it is, right? In sports, if you're the darling until you're not, and it turned quickly for him. But I do think he deserves more praise than he gets. But let's pump the brakes a little bit on the Hall of Fame talk and one of the greatest to ever play the game. College football. Are we looking at Georgia as possibly the new Alabama? Alabama had I would still say they're probably in the middle of an incredible run. The fact that they went 10-2 and we said it's a down year is pretty impressive. When you really, I mean, the standard that Nick Saban has set for that team, to talk about a team only losing 2 games. But Georgia, I think, has a chance to be there. And I want to have a larger discussion about some other teams and what this could mean. But do you think Georgia has replaced Alabama as the top dog in all of college football?
That's good. That's a really good question, actually. They will when Nick Saban retires. How about that? And it's gonna come soon. Alabama has just been so good since at least 2009. What have they won? 6 championships,
something like that.
I know
it's been at least 5, and it probably is 6. I can't remember the exact number, but it's a lot. Yeah,
I believe it's 6. Georgia's a little ways to do before they kind of get into that tier. To back is great. I mean, really, really impressive. But I also want to see them win another one before I put them into the Alabama tier. Period. Will they replace Alabama as the premier program? Probably at some point. I don't know how they would slow down. I mean, they're just consistently recruiting dudes who bigger, faster, more technically advanced than basically anybody else in college football.
Yeah, I mean, and let's also be honest. There's rumors out there that they may be landing possibly one of the best recruiting quarterback prospects we've seen since Trevor Lawrence and Dylan Raiola in 2024. There are a lot of rumors flying around that they may be landing him. And if they do that, I mean, that's going to be possibly one of the best recruits Kirby Smart has ever landed. I think I'm with you, though. I'm not putting him above Alabama just yet. Just mentioned, I mean, they only lost 2 games, and it's not like either one of those were blowouts either. It was literally on the final play of both of those games that Alabama lost. Otherwise, they're probably in the national champ, or not in the national, they're in the playoffs over Ohio State, I think, if they only lose one of those. So then they have a chance to completely undo everything we're talking about here. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, they almost topped Texas A&M's like historic recruiting class from a couple of years ago. Just a couple of years removed after having that historical recruiting class, Texas A&M jumped them, which the rumors around that is Texas A&M bought that class. That's not something that's being mentioned with Alabama's ability to get these players. That's 100% Nick Saban and what he's able to do. So if you're bringing in those players, we know Nick Saban knows how to develop them. I just don't think that he's going anywhere soon, as you mentioned, until he retires. And I do think all the talk about Georgia being the top dog is going to fire Saban up a little bit more. I think I think David Pollack saying what he said on that halftime show right in front of Nick Saban and everybody else saying it really hurt themselves, actually, because I think they just added fire to Nick Saban. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if Nick Saban's like, you know what? I'm probably going to leave in a year or 2. Now Nick Saban wants to stick around for like another 4 or 5 because he's got that fire back in him. Who would you put in tier 2 then? If we're keeping out, do Alabama and Georgia at least deserve to be in the same tier right now for you?
I think so.
So if we're putting them there, in my opinion, there's nobody else that deserves to be up there. It's Alabama and Georgia, then we're dropping down. Is it just Ohio State and Michigan, or would you even put them both in the same tier? I mean, I know that Ohio State's been in the playoffs more often than Michigan, but Michigan has beaten them twice in a row and made it to the playoffs, where Ohio State's they've been in and out every other year.
I still don't think I would put Michigan there. They just don't recruit the level of athlete and player that a team like Georgia does. I'm not sure Ohio State necessarily does either. I mean, they're just different. Michigan has a lot to do, I think, to prove that they deserve to be in that tier. Because, I mean, Ohio State has been doing that for a while. Michigan's done it in back-to-back years where they beat Ohio State. I don't know. And I mean, you have a couple teams, I think, knocking on that tier. One is USC. LSU could get there. I think Texas could get there. But currently, it might just be Alabama, Georgia, then Ohio State. I mean, nobody else is sustaining success like that.
Can I throw one other team that maybe should be up there with Ohio State? Arch I know you're going to Ohio State right now.
Oh, arch rivals.
Yeah, we hate them. I'm going to put me in the we category now as a fan of Ohio State, because we've questioned this team. I forgot to mention it earlier when we talked about this national championship game. TCU just lost. They're really good offensive coordinator and Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's little brother, and he's going to Clemson, who has been good, has been making the playoffs. They did not this year, but what have we talked about? The big thing on them is Dabo in that offense. Garrett Riley's going to run a good offense. As long as Dabo keeps his hands off it, lets Garrett Riley do what he does. I don't like admitting this out loud, but like I feel like Clemson probably deserves to be in that tier because why they don't they're like Michigan when it comes to recruiting, right? Like they get I think usually top 10 classes, but it's not like they're not landing all these top 5-star guys, but what they do is develop, and I have to give them a lot of credit for that because the players they are able to develop, they're getting guys in the first round, they're playing well. I get having Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence as your quarterbacks, but they had really good defenses as well. Really good wide receivers, which maybe Lawrence and Watson helped develop those guys still. They've had the players. Does Clemson deserve to be in that second tier with Ohio State? And what does this mean for Garrett Riley, too? I want to let the people know how big of a deal this is for Garrett Riley going to Clemson.
All right, I'll say no first because of how bad their last 2 seasons have been. There's a lot of work that team still needs from a recruiting perspective. They're still recruiting a single archetype at wide receiver. They've gotten better at it. Antonio Williams kind of broke that mold this year and had a phenomenal freshman season, so I don't want to totally put that that they can't improve there. The offensive line recruiting has not been good for probably 5 years, at least 5 years now, probably longer than that. It's just a position that they don't recruit well and kind of ignore. Really bizarre. Defense is spectacular. Never really been the issue there. They're going to have 2 first-rounders, probably in the top 10 on defense, and Miles Murphy and Brian Brzee. But they've just been kind of poor last 2 years. It's hard for me to get there with them. But bringing Garrett Riley, who is one of the best offensive coordinators in the entire sport, probably paying him a boatload of money too. That's a really big deal. He knows how to game plan. You saw it all season long. TCU ranked top 5 in EPA per play. The rushing game was spectacular with Kendre Miller, and he knows how to scheme players open in the intermediate and deep areas of the field. I think it could be a much improved. It will be a much improved offense. How about that? Brandon Streeter was terrible. Tony Elliott was terrible. Those dudes do not know how to call plays or maximize any of the talent they have, especially with the poor offensive line. They don't know how to scheme around that. Clemson could get back there. They need to have a really good bounce back year to do so, though. And they might. Garrett Riley is a huge addition.
I'm going to tell you why I think, and again, I don't like saying this. I don't like being the guy defending Clemson here. You mentioned Ohio State's been here for a while. I argue they haven't. They've been here longer than Clemson and Michigan because of Urban Meyer. But if you go back and look at their history, going all the way back to Jim Tressel, which granted he won a national championship. It's not easy to do. I think any coach who wins a national championship should be celebrated. I think it's much harder to do than winning a Super Bowl because of the possible disparities in talent around college football and what you had to do to get there. You're in essence asking a coach to get a bunch of 18-year-olds to be perfect for 12 to 14 weeks of a year. That alone, I'm 30. I'm about to be 36 years old. I'm not perfect for like 6 hours a day. And you're asking these guys to do it for 4 or 5 hours every single Saturday in practice, at school, everything. There's a lot that goes into that. So for me, any coach who wins a national championship deserves to be celebrated. But outside of that national championship, what did Jim Tressel do besides winning the Big Ten? I mean, he got to 2 national championships. They got blown out by Florida and LSU.
What was Tressel's last year at Ohio State?
That would have been 2010? No, 2011. One of those, right around there, because Fickle was the interim for 1 year, because it was the Terrell Pryor tattoo gate that forced Jim Tressel out the door. Terrell Pryor got suspended.
2010.
Okay, yeah, so 2010. Luke Fickle was interim for 1 year.
I don't care what happened 12 years ago.
Well, so let me get to it. This is the point that I'm getting with Clemson. I had to set it up because I'm going to compare. I'm going to compare the two because of the Garrett Riley thing. No, you're good. I get you. I don't really compare what happened 12 minutes ago, so I get you on 12 years for it. It's the comparison fact. So, but there was talks at that time that Jim Tressel was possibly going to be on his way out anyways because one Urban Meyer was looking for a job, and we all knew that he had wanted at some point to be at Ohio State. Why I want to make the comparison here is what did Urban Meyer do? Urban Meyer, in my opinion, as much as I do not think he's a good coach, turned Ohio State into a top-tier elite team in reality with the way he recruited.
I thought you were going to say he faked a heart attack.
He did fake a heart attack. We'll get to that.
Because that's what he did.
He did. I won't disagree with you on that part either. No, the first one was it was the brain stuff. He's got the oh man, I don't want to get it wrong. He's got something causes really really bad headaches. That's why he would struggle
migraines?
with. Well, I mean, I get migraines and I can work, but I don't know. No, it's like something. See, I don't want to speak wrong here, and so like I don't want to just.
Let's just say Urban Meyer's medical issues have forced him to take his long coveted Ohio State job.
Yes, there we go. We'll use that. That's a better way of wording it. But when he came in, he ended up thank you, Will. Will's in our ears and stuff. With Urban Meyer, though, the recruiting is what brought, in my opinion, Ohio State to that next level. Because Jim Tressel was winning games, but they could not compete with the SEC. They continually got beat fairly. I think LSU, it was like 40-something to 14, and I know Miami was 35-3. No, not Miami. I'm sorry. Florida. Florida was 35-3. It was bad. It was bad. And that was the year Troy Smith won the Heisman. Like, they had the Heisman quarterback, and it was nothing. They could not do anything against them. But Urban Meyer brought that to the Big Ten. And why? He went out, he started hiring these really good offensive, defensive coordinators, and that's where I think the SEC has succeeded. We just talked about how Stetson Bennett, while good, not great. But why has he looked great? Todd Monken. The SEC, Kirby Smart had no issues going and paying Todd Monken a ton of money to come over and do that. Dabo has refused to go to the transfer portal to try and do early recruiting. He's always promoted within his system, right? You mentioned Tony Elliott, all these guys that he's promoted within his family, his loyalty. He's finally gone outside of that and got a Garrett Riley. That is where I think Clemson may be coming from. I think Dabo, even though he is built NIL in God's name, image, and likeness, as he quoted out just a couple weeks ago, whatever it was at that point, he looks like he's actually changing what he does and bringing in these other guys. And that's why I think Clemson could get back to what they were. Because as I mentioned, they've developed. They've done a really good job getting these lower-end guys and doing it with, let's be honest, a coaching staff that outside of Brent Venables was not good. Now they are bringing in a really good offensive guy. They've got a decent quarterback. I'm not as high on Cade as you are, but you like Cade Klubnik. I know you and Alfred, one of our other co-founders, really big on him, think he could be really good. They have Antonio Williams. They have Adam Randall. They have Will Shipley. Like, this may not be a bad team if Garrett Riley can get them going. And that's where I think they could take that step forward, because it looks like Dabo's making the moves like Ohio State did 12 years ago to try and put this team up in that upper tier.
So Dabo's going to retire, take a different job, and Garrett Riley's going to take over in like 3 or 4 years.
I would love that. I might actually root for Clemson at that point. I might actually root for Clemson, Who knows?
I mean, that's what happened with Ryan Day and Urban Meyer, right?
Yes.
I tend to agree. I think this hire is fantastic for Clemson. I don't think they could have done better than this. I don't think there's a singular hire that they could make that would have outpaced this one. I heard rumors that Willie Korn was going to be the guy who was the offensive coordinator at Coastal Carolina the last couple of years. I would have hated that. And then they dropped the Garrett Riley bomb. Whew. If you're a Clemson fan, you just got to be super excited for this, because I mean, he's a great play caller. Yeah. Dude's only 33 and has, like, his last 3 seasons, SMU and TCU has just done a phenomenal job, just out of this world. So, yes, Clemson could be back, and it would probably be because Dabo swallowed his pride and hired outside of his family,
which is good. That's what you got to do. I'm surprised.
It's really what you have to do in college football. You need different perspectives. Yeah. You can't just keep it all within Clemson, South Carolina. Clemson ain't that big of a town. I've been there.
Yeah, it really is. And, well, that's the other thing, too. I think that's where I think the SEC has done such a, like, they always say it means more. Sure, whatever. I really don't think it does. I think the Big 12 cares just as much about their football as the Big 10 does. Maybe not the Pac-12. I feel like there's a lot going on out there in California and all those other places. So does it mean that much in South Carolina? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
It means that much South Carolina. Go Cox.
Well, I agree with you. It definitely means something in the SEC. I will not disagree with you there. But, Texas is not.
It means more.
It means more. You're right. I apologize. But the SEC is never, those schools have never been afraid to shell out money to bring in these top offensive and defensive coordinators to their schools. And that's what I think, Matt, like we just saw it with Stetson Bennett. And I don't want to say that that matters for every player in college football, but I do think coaching matters a little bit more on the college side than it does the NFL side. Because a lot of those players, like Patrick Mahomes, I think you could take Patrick Mahomes from Andy Reid and put him with, I was going to say Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, and Matt Patricia, who's a defensive coach calling offensive plays. I still think Patrick Mahomes is going to be pretty damn good and probably take New England to the playoffs.
Mahomes would just ignore anything Patricia's saying in his ear and just run
right.
So
and he's earned the right to do that. But like that's the thing. But so the equivalent of that right now would be like a Caleb Williams. Like if you were to take Caleb Williams away from USC and put him at Clemson, like I think he'd be fine. But he would not be the Caleb Williams we're seeing at USC because coaching matters more on the college level, I think, than it does the NFL side. And the SEC, where it matters more, and I'm quotating, if you're not watching, quotations, matters more. They have not been afraid to go out and hire these guys, and I think that's where we're starting to see that change. We've seen the Big Ten start doing that a little bit more, and now you get Clemson doing that, going and getting a Garrett Riley. I think it's going to be, as you mentioned, a great move as well.
I think you're actually going to, and this is the last point that I'll make on this, I think you're going to see this in real time with Drake May this year. Because he's going for Phil Longo, a very, very quarterback-friendly system, to Chip Lindsey, who I don't think is quite as quarterback-friendly. Good coach, just not quite as quarterback-friendly. I think you're going to see how offensive coordinators can impact a player and how certain players, like a Drake May, like a Caleb Williams, can overcome potentially not so friendly play calling.
Yeah, which sucks because Drake May, phenomenal season last year. It would really suck to kind of see him take a small step back, which I agree with you. I think we might end up seeing, unfortunately. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about who could possibly be the 2023 national champion. We'll talk about 5 teams we're willing to bet on being the next Georgia and some player props as well.
Campus2Canton.
Better Sports Network is sponsored by Lucra.
Your 2023 prediction on the promo that we play was the Lakers was going to make the playoffs and beat somebody in the first round.
Hey,
That is
I hope we match up against Memphis.
That's not going to happen.
I hope we match up against Memphis.
And you'll get swept.
Ain't no way we get swept.
Sweep them. The Memphis Grizzlies would be swept. They would be laughing at them.
If the Grizzlies if the Lakers make the playoffs with AD healthy, Westbrook off the bench, and LeBron, everybody's healthy, they will beat the Memphis Grizzlies 100%.
We will be on Lucra betting on that game right
100%.
now. All right, Better Sports Network is sponsored by Lucra. Lucra is redefining friendly competition. Compete in the games you play and the sports you watch with Lucra. Download the Lucra app right now to create a contest and bet against your friends in as little as 15 seconds. Use the promo code BSM when you sign up to receive a free $5 to play with. Winning is fun, and beating your friends is even better.
Lucra is redefining friendly competition. Download the Lucra app today to challenge your friends and win money.
All right, we are back. Campus2Canton. That is Chris Moxley. I am Matt Bruening here for the Better Sports Network. And you just heard Corey Parsons talking about Lucra, and I want to talk to you about them as well. Better Sports Network is sponsored by Lucra, and Lucra is redefining the friendly competition. You can compete in games you play and the sports you watch with Lucra. Download the Lucra app right now, create a contest, and bet against your friends in as little as 15 seconds. Make sure to use the promo code BSN when you sign up to receive a free $5 to play with, and we're going to give you some possible plays that you can play here in the future as well. And I want to jump right to that, Moxley. Some futures are out. We are going to talk a little bit about them. Top team and player prop futures. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, the 3 we talked about being in that top tier of college football, are the 3 favorites right now to win the national championship in 2023. Makes a lot of sense. Georgia listed at 260, plus 260, Alabama plus 500, and Ohio State plus 750. Without going all across this whole list here, who are some of the best bets you have to make the playoffs and possibly win a national championship in 2023?
So my favorite, and it's been that for, since these dropped Monday night-ish, has been Florida State. I think this Florida State team is actually was pretty good last year. I had them ranked as a top 10 team at the end of the season, ratings-wise, and I think they're going to be top 7-ish again this year. And they play in a weak ACC. What they have to do is two things. They have to beat LSU, which not an easy task. I have them power ranked very similarly top 8 team, and Clemson, who I felt a lot better about 2 hours ago beating before they got Garrett Riley. But I still think this Florida State team can beat them offensively, because I just think the group that Florida State's assembled on offense, George is more talented, and on defense, I think they've made massive steps. They're keeping Jared Verse, which is a gigantic move. I think he would have been a first-round edge. And then they also brought in Cypress, who is a corner from Virginia. Very good player as well. Probably top 3 player in the transfer portal. So I think they're going to be a lot better. And they were already good. They were already a team I really liked. So my thought is I think they can win the ACC. And if they can win the ACC, they're probably in the playoffs. So I really like Florida State. I like LSU for basically similar reasons that I just gave, but I feel worse about their chances to beat Alabama in back-to-back years. They do have a team that is top 8, and if they can beat the Tide, then I think they'll go back to the SEC championship. If they can do that without getting crushed by Georgia, maybe they'll make it this time. And the other one, I go back and forth one because I think that they have the tools and they have the players and they have the resources and they have almost everything lining up, but I don't know what to expect from the quarterback, and that's Penn State. I think if Drew Lollard is who we think he is, he was a 5-star last year. He's been comped to Josh Allen. Like, that's the type of player we're dealing with. If he proves to be even pretty good, I think Penn State has a good shot, because they actually brought a lot of talent back as well. On both sides of the ball, they had a tackle who probably would have been a top 15 pick. He's returning. Penn State can be sneaky, because I think Penn State can get to the Big Ten championship if things break their way. We just had 2 Big Ten teams in the Final Four. I guess not unheard of. So those are the teams that I think that they just hang enough to get there. And if you can get there, I'll bet on you.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was looking at these futures, I was looking for teams I think could make the playoffs, because we just talked about earlier in the show. We feel like, college football could be moving a little bit toward not like massive parity, but a little bit more, because there's no real team standing out. And all the big teams, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, all have major question marks right now heading into the 2023 season. Georgia, Alabama, we have no idea what we're going to get out of their quarterback. Same thing with Ohio State. And Ohio State just lost their almost entire offensive line to the NFL draft. They haven't necessarily been out there recruiting top 15 guys in the recruiting class past couple of years to replace them. So there's a lot of questions around those teams. And as you mentioned, Penn State bringing all those guys back. Like, even if, say, they can't beat one of Ohio State or Michigan, but if they beat the other and they only have one loss and it was a close loss, like, I do agree with you. They could be possibly kind of backdooring their way into the playoffs like Ohio State did. My other one is Texas. Talked about this all year on the show. When we were doing these shows on Saturdays, the Mullet Master, Chris was breaking out the props. I called in from the Red River shootout. We did the whole thing. You've talked a lot about how good their offensive line was throughout the year, mostly with true freshmen as well. Those guys now another year in the system. We definitely have to hope that Quinn takes a step forward. He looked good, got injured, took a step back, never really got back on track. We have to hope he becomes that 5-star we expect him to be. But they've got talent all over the field. They have one really tough game against Alabama, and it is in Tuscaloosa. It's not going to be an easy game, but we saw them lose a close game to Alabama last year with their backup, Hudson Card, in Texas. And they were in, realistically, the playoff discussion until they ended up losing multiple games down the road. If they lose one game to Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and again, another close game that was by a last-minute field goal by Alabama, let's say they lose by a field goal again, if they go on and win the Big 12, I think they're in because Texas is a name brand, and I think they will put them in there. USC is the other one for me, but it is hard for me to bet. And they're at plus 1,400. I should mention Texas is at plus 2,200. USC is kind of a hard one for – I really want to avoid the Pac-12 altogether because I feel like we're going to see the same thing in 2023 that we saw in 2022. It's like there's a lot of Pac-12 teams that were ranked fairly highly. The problem was they didn't play a lot of really tough out-of-conference opponents outside of Oregon. Oregon got Georgia and got smacked, and then Utah did play a Florida team, ended up not being quite as good as we thought they might be. Was a really good game, though. But all they're really going to do is possibly beat up on each other, and USC – bringing back Alex Grinch, who I do not think is a good defensive coordinator. I don't know how much that defense is going to improve. I feel like, we might not see many improvements, and I just don't know that USC is going to be able to survive every single week in shootout after shootout after shootout. I think that's kind of the thing that's plagued Lincoln Riley in his career, and they need to kind of shore that part of their team up. But those would be the two that I would really kind of go all in on. I'm still putting money in on Ohio State, mostly because I'm a homer, but I do think that they've got a really good shot. I actually think I put money in on Alabama over Georgia, though. I think they've got the better shot to go in and win a national championship over Georgia. If you had to pick between those two, Mox, who would you take?
At their respective odds or straight up?
Whichever you want. You can give me both answers if they're different.
I think the smart bet is Georgia. I actually think this 2023 Georgia team is going to be better than this 2022 Georgia team was. Just the freshmen that they're and sophomores that they're putting into full-time roles next year. Like, this is a really good Georgia team, and so is 2021's. I think 2023 could be as good as 2021's was. I just thought 2022 was a down year comparatively. So I think I would still bet on Georgia. I mean, they're the favorite for a reason, right? They're plus 260, Alabama's plus 500. It's not super close. So that's where I would put my money. And their out of conference schedule is like it's 3 G5 teams, it's 2 G5 teams and UT Martin, who is a FBS team. Yes. Or are they G2? They got to be FBS.
Yeah, they're FBS. Yeah, so, I don't think they play a tough team till the rivalry game with Tennessee? Is that their first actual matchup of the season?
Yeah, I think that's their toughest game. That's probably their toughest game on the schedule, period.
Oh, yeah, because I think they avoid Alabama again this year as well. So you're looking – I think there was a talk that they could have ended up being like 42-1 by the end of the season or something like that, because they have obviously the one loss against Alabama in the SEC championship in 2021, and their schedule is looking like they're not going – even with the questions at quarterback, not really many questions about what this team overall will be. The quarterback for Georgia is here listed in the Heisman futures, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't think Brock Vandagriff is good. I don't know what to think of Carson Beck, because I feel like he's Stetson Bennett, but I don't think that can actually be a compliment now with what Stetson Bennett did. Brock Vandagriff listed at plus 3,000. Carson Beck listed at plus 4,000. We just talked about the Alabama quarterbacks, Ty Simpson, who I expect is probably going to win the job, and the odds look like they favor that as well at plus 4,000. Jalen Milroe plus 6,000. Where are you leaning on Heisman odds? Because I feel like a lot of the, I don't want to say uneducated bettors, but I feel like a lot of people are going to go straight to Caleb Williams, knowing he's the best quarterback in college football, probably going to have another great year, but he just won it. And I honestly do not think, I don't care if he goes out there and has an amazing season. I really feel like voters are not going to vote a two-time Heisman winner ever again. That feels like it's never really come close to that. I don't think it'll happen. So for taking Caleb Williams off the board, who's the best bet? Because I feel like it's wide open right now.
Yeah, so I actually released an article 3 days ago, like right after the national championship on this. I'll start with the two situations you named first, Georgia and Alabama. Carson Beck opened at plus 10,000. He is now plus 4,000. So going from 100-1 to 40-1 is a gigantic leap.
Yeah.
I still think Beck is a great bet at 40-1. I mean, he is probably the starter next year, even though the market's treating Vandegrift like he is. I don't think that's going to be the case. I really think it's going to be Beck. He was ahead of him in spring, fall, during the game, and he came in second during the national championship. Like, what is telling you that Vandegrift's going to be that guy? And practice reports haven't been really positive for Vandegrift either. So I think Beck at 4,000 is pretty interesting. I like putting a little something on both Alabama quarterbacks. I think it's Ty Simpson as well. But, I mean, Miller was like 60-1. He might start for Alabama, who's probably a playoff-bound team. And those are the type of bets that I'm trying to make. In general, just a Georgia quarterback, an Alabama quarterback, those generally pay off incredibly well. Like, you need to be a top 10 team, period, to probably be a Heisman candidate. So, like, 15 of the last 18 have been from top 10 teams, and 14 of the last 18 have been from top 5 teams. So basically, you need to be like a top 5 team is the reality of the situation. Like 78% have come from there. So that eliminates a lot of plays, in my opinion.
Yeah. If you have to be a top 5 team, so I want to discuss on the Alabama side here really quick. Because Jalen Milroe didn't look good. I mean, he really only played in the 2 games when Bryce Young got hurt. I mean, maybe you could argue, I guess he has like a Jalen Hurts type season, but Hurts really wasn't in the Heisman conversation when he was with Alabama. He didn't get there until he went to Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley. I feel like Ty Simpson, I'm with you. And that's what the money's telling you too, right? They've got him at the better odds because they think he's probably going to be the starter. I guess I wouldn't mind throwing money on Milroe because you never know. I guess he could do that. And if he ends up going and having a really good season, as you mentioned, we expect Alabama to bounce back this year, possibly could do it. For me, I'm looking at teams, as you mentioned, top 5, going to make the playoffs that I think have good odds here. I mean, they're not great. Kyle McCord at 2. Is Devin Brown listed? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think he's plus 8,000.
So that's not a bad bet if you think he's going to beat out Kyle McCord to get that job. No, I would put a little bit of money on the Ohio State quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd put both in their situation. I mean, $5 on Jalen Milroe at plus 6,000.
Yeah,
like that's $300. I'm just saying, like that's an Alabama quarterback who might start. Same thing about Devin Brown. $5 on Devin Brown's like $400. I'm just saying it's not a bad. Just throw who's on the $5 bill.
Yeah. This is not bad.
Whoever's on the $5 bill, just throw them on there.
No, like, do you really need gas to go to work? Just throw a 20 down on there. I was advocating earlier this year to throw like hundreds of dollars down on Texas to make the playoffs. But we're not doing that again this year. But maybe throw $20 down on some of these guys. The wife will thank you when you win some of these bets and you're able to buy her something nice because we know you're not going to be able to use it on yourself. So she'll thank you when you're able to win some of these bets. But Kyle McCord, Devin Brown. So Devin Brown at 8,000. Kyle McCord, I don't know if I said it, at plus 2,000 here.
These are all on FanDuel, by the way. They're the only one that's consistently posted odds that go that deep. Nobody else really has. So this is where I'm getting these numbers from. I got 3 more I like.
Okay, I got 2 more. So give me your 3 really quick. See if we match up on some of them.
Okay. I'll just list them off because I know we're going to have one that's the same. Jordan Travis. Same reason like Florida State. I think that he could be really like, they don't even need to win. They just need to be in playoff contention for him to get that level of recognition. Sam Hartman at Notre Dame. I think that he could thrive in that offense, and stats have never really been an issue for him. It's been being on a 7-5 Wake Forest team. Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, Quinn.
I knew you were gonna have Quinn, so
I have to, because when he does cash, if he does cash, I will be very happy, man. Yeah, because again, I just mentioned I think they have a chance to make the playoffs, and pedigree and his name pedigree matters as well. If he goes out there again, Sark offense we've seen be very productive everywhere he's been outside of like the 1 year at USC. If he's able to go out there and do it and get Texas to the playoffs, I think he will be a lead candidate. My other one is actually going a route that you took in a team that could possibly make the playoffs, and that's Drew Allar. Because I do think he as well could be the reason that Penn State gets in the playoffs and could have a really good season. I mean, a kid who, you mentioned earlier has been comped to Josh Allen. I mean, he's completely reworked his mechanics, and I thought he looked good stepping into some of those games when Sean Clifford came out, when they were blowing teams out. It's going to be his offense, his team. I am a little worried about some of the weapons around him, but also when you have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen to keep the ball moving at times, when you maybe the drives are stalling out, that's going to help. And he can use his legs as well. He's not a zero when it comes to that part. So he's an interesting bet. Like you said, throw $5 down on it. If Penn State ends up making the playoffs and he wins it, you're going to look like a genius. And really, it's just like, well, Moxley and Matt said just throw $5 on this Drew Allar kid. I don't even know who he is. Well, just trust us. He's going to be good. And so I really think he's the other one. Like, I actually do really like. I'm curious about Sam Hartman. I don't know how that's going to work, but I do like the Jordan Travis one because, like, he's a guy, too, who I'm sure a lot of people were able to watch him a little bit. A lot of those Florida State games were in prime time this year. He did not look that good last year. I think he took a massive step forward this year. And as you mentioned, if they're going to be a really good team, I think he's got a chance in a Mike Norvell offense to put up points. So I think that's a very intriguing bet as well.
Yeah, I mean, they were like 14th per play on offense. They added Jakeem Bell, Kyle Morlock as tight ends. Jeremiah Byers, who's like one of my favorite tackles from UTEP. Really good player too. Like, I think they shored up the offensive line. We talked about all the guys they're getting back on defense. I think those odds are pretty good, especially when you're considering Florida State is 20-1 to win the Natty. Like, that's top 10 odds as well. It just kind of lines up for Jordan Travis. That's kind of a bet that I want to make at that price. To talk about Quinn a little bit more, and people are going to push back on this because he looked bad. Here's how he ranked him on Power 5 quarterbacks last year in some of PFF's advanced metrics. 8th in big time throw rate. He had the lowest time to throw because the freshmen on the offensive line were not adept at pass blocking quite yet. 2.44 seconds. Hold on. I want to make sure I get this right. He has a higher big time throw percentage than Caleb Williams, and his ADOT was 10th, which means that he's pushing the ball downfield consistently and hitting big time throws. That was higher than Drake May, Michael Penix, and Caleb Williams. Advanced stats tell me Queen Ewers is not a bad quarterback. Drops don't help. He was 6th in the country in drop rate, with Xavier Worthy looking terrible for half the year. He gets Jatavian Sanders back. He gets Isaiah Neyor back. He gets Jonte Cook. He gets Xavier Worthy, who can probably only be better. Yeah. I love this Texas team too. Like, I think they're a dark horse to make the playoffs. Like, they're top 8 in odds currently, and I don't think that's a bad bet. Like, Kelvin Banks and Cole Hudson are a year older. Really good offensive linemen. I love their defense. They just added Jalen Catalon from Arkansas at safety. He's a first-round talent if he can stay healthy. I'm in on Queen Ewers, man, and I hate that I am because he disappointed me last year, but I think he may have been better than we knew. I mean, if your thumb is messed up, you can't grip the football.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
No, I mean, I'm with you, and that's kind of been my argument kicking back, because that's all people are saying now, right? It's like Quinn Ewers, he's just not good. I think the other part you have to put into this conversation, that was his first year starting in 2 full seasons, and you just talked about all the metrics on how good he was, and the dude was not a starting quarterback for 2 straight years. Didn't play in it. For those of you who do not know, he did not play his senior year in high school. He missed most of his junior year as well with double groin surgery. He had to get both of his groins fixed. Came back to play in the state championship. Yeah, it's not good. I know. I talked to the South Lake Carroll coach about this. He had both of his surgery on both of his groins. Comes back in the state championship game. Doctors did not want him to play. They literally told the South Lake Carroll head coach, he has to stay in the pocket. You cannot let him run or he will tear his groins again. So the dude couldn't run. He had to stand in the pocket, take all this punishment. They still barely lose to Lake Travis and Cade Klubnik in the state championship. Then after that, he reclassifies because he wants to gets the bag from kombucha, goes to Ohio State.
Yeah, the $8 million kombucha sponsorship.
We're all doing it. Everybody knocks these kids for doing it. If kombucha comes to me and says, "Hey, Matt, I want you to get on TV every other week in a Speedo and bathe in
kombucha."
Yeah, I'm doing it for $8 million. I have no shame. I will do that. Kombucha. Call me. We're here. We're here for you. We're looking. Not a sponsor, could be. Just saying. But
not a sponsor, could be.
Everybody hates on him for doing that, and I don't. Good for him. Go do what you got to do. But third string quarterback, he's not getting any reps. He got two handoffs in his entire career at Ohio State. Then finally moves over here to Texas. Doesn't really get helped out at all during spring and having to split reps with Hudson Card the entire spring instead of just letting the kid go and try and get more and more reps in. And then, as you just mentioned, ends up having those advanced stats in his first 3 years as a starter while also being injured with all the drops, bad offensive line. Like, I think people write this kid off way too soon. And I think it's going to come back to bite a lot of people in the ass, and I'm here for it because I haven't bailed off that ship yet.
He was one of the, 6 players ever
Yes.
who've been perfect recruits?
5, yeah. We're probably going to be 6 because I think Arch is going to end up there, but it's 5 right now, yeah.
Yeah, and Rayola might too. So let's say 5 right now. It's really hard to be part of the perfect club at 24/7. Very rarely happens. Quinn Ewers is that type of talent. The talent didn't go anywhere. And you see it with advanced metrics. I think that plays out pretty well. So I'm betting on a guy who's going to give me 25 to 1 odds on a team that I think is going to be really good. And I thought was really good this year. Texas went 8-5, and I still had them ranked as a top 12 team. Did they even finish I think they finished maybe 25th if they were even ranked this year.
They were
good.
Ranked. What were they? I think they were 21 or 22. They played Washington which was not a great bowl game, but they were ranked.
Xavier Worth, they also dropped a touchdown in that game. In case you're,
dropped 4 passes alone in that game.
Yeah. It was quite the bad luck year for Quinn. I think Texas could rebound really strong. They have the best odds to currently win the Big 12. If they win the Big 12 and go with 1 loss to Alabama, that's a playoff team. And I think Quinn's getting a lot of that credit because Bijan Robinson ain't there to bail you out anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. Like I've mentioned before, besides the talent with Quinn Ewers, my other big thing was Steve Sarkisian. Like, that's who I've been all in on because he's shown that ability. Like, you go back to, I get it. Mac, if you want to talk about Tua Tagovailoa and how great he was, that's fine. Quinn technically was rated much higher, and I think is the better player overall. No disrespect to Tua, who is a great college quarterback, but he took Mac Jones, a guy that everybody said there's no way he beats out Bryce Young, turns him into a Heisman finalist, gets him first-round draft capital. Cody Kessler at USC, he turned into a 3rd-round pick. I'm sorry, guys, Cody Kessler was not good. He got Jake Locker first-round capital, guys, when he was with Washington. On top of that, Matt Ryan had one of his best fantasy seasons ever in the NFL when Steve Sarkisian was his offensive coordinator. Steve Sarkisian knows how to coach offense. Just say what you want about him. He's very good. You see the respect that Nick Saban has for him. Now you give, as you just mentioned, all that stuff, all the weapons there. Hopefully Xavier Worthy gets him, stick him on his gloves next year and holds on to those balls. Got an improved offensive line and all these players another year in the system. I know it sucks losing the best running back in the nation in Bijan Robinson, but I think they're going to be fine with Jonathan Brooks. They'll figure out something with Keelan Robinson, maybe Jadon Blue, but you know what? They have got a really good freshman, Cedric Baxter Jr., coming in who he's not going to be Bijan Robinson, but he can be really damn good for that offense. And I think the running game is going to be just fine. So I'm with you. I'm going to do it right now. I can't do it in Texas. I need to Austin's busy, and I can't text Austin. I'm going to text one of you guys to put in a bet for me on Quinn Ewers. I'm going to send you the money because I need a receipt to wave in Felix's face when he ends up winning the Heisman.
So is Quinn 25 to 1 your favorite Heisman bet currently?
Him and Kyle McCord, because I do believe McCord's going to win that job, and I just think you have to bet on an Ohio State quarterback.
Yeah. My top 3, Carson Beck 40 to 1, Travis 12 to 1, McCord 20 to 1, Quinn 25 to 1. I know that's 4.
4, that's all right. Yeah,
they're all
3A, 3B. I got you. Yeah, so then if I were to give mine, Quinn Ewers is my favorite, Kyle McCord second, and one we didn't really talk about, maybe Cade Klubnik with Garrett Riley there. Clemson going to the playoffs.
He's 25 to 1 right now, but those odds are going up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Garrett Riley. You just said it, right? Maybe we're back in. Guys, make sure to stay tuned in to Better Sports Network for all of your sports news. That is Chris Moxley. I am Matt Bruening. Thank you so much for tuning in to Campus2Canton. We will see you guys again next week.